The wine glasses trembled faintly on their stems as Douglas Harrington's voice cut through the air. Like a whip, "I'll give you $100,000, he said, loud and smug, "if you serve me in Chinese." The entire dining hall of Avalon Grill, nestled in the gold glass heart of downtown Chicago, went silent. You could hear the tick of a Cartier watch to tables down. Then came the slow rustle of movement as heads turned, white collars, cufflinks, diamond earrings, all tilting toward one focal point, the black waitress holding a tray of Dom Perignon and caviar. Her name tag said Maya, neat script on polished silver. Her eyes met the bills fluttering down like insult-shaped snowflakes onto her tray. One after another, 10, 20, until the total reached 100,000. Doug Harrington, real estate mogul, self-proclaimed king of the loop, a man who once tried to trademark his own name, smirked like he'd just delivered the punchline of a cruel joke. Behind him sat three sharply dressed Asian men, investors from Tokyo and Seoul, watching the scene with expressions ranging from discomfort to disbelief. Maya didn't flinch. She didn't blink. She just stood there, spine straight as a ruler, while her fingers tightened imperceptibly round the tray's edges. Her knuckles turned white, but her lips stayed neutral. Doug leaned back in his Italian leather seat, 10 fingers clasped over his stomach. "What's the matter, sweetheart?" he asked. "Not enough for you? These gentlemen," he gestured to the investors, "they'll be the judges. Let's see how well you perform for them." The tone of his voice oozed arrogance. He wasn't offering money for entertainment. He was staging a public flogging with money as the whip, and Maya as the intended spectacle. The Avalon, known for its 5-star steaks and 7-figure clientele, had suddenly turned into a Roman Colosseum. Maya looked down at the money. $100,000. She could smell the ink, sharp and arrogant, just like the man who'd dropped it. It was more than 2 years of wages at the Avalon, enough to clear the last of her mother's medical debts, enough to get her baby sister out of the crowded South Side charter school, enough to breathe again. But that wasn't what this was about. It never had been. This was about Doug Harrington proving to a table of potential partners that he could command anyone, especially a black woman in an apron and flats, to dance at his whim. It was about dominance, about power, about spectacle. "You know what?" Doug added, clapping once, slowly, as if mocking a theater performance. "If you mess it up, you apologize. Here, in front of everyone. Because I'm betting my fortune you can't even say thank you in Chinese." The three investors exchanged glances. One of them, an older man in gold-rimmed glasses, shifted uncomfortably, his brows pulling together. Maya exhaled once, quiet and long. Her eyes flicked across the room. Couples had paused their filet mignon. Servers froze mid-pour. Even the pianist had stilled his fingers over the keys. She was used to being invisible here. But now, everyone saw her, and they expected her to break. "I accept," she said, her voice steadier than even she had expected. Doug's grin faltered, just slightly. "What's that?" "I accept your proposal, Mr. Harrington. I will serve you in Chinese. And when I'm done, you will hand me the $100,000 in front of everyone here." There was a ripple through the room, a murmur of disbelief. One man chuckled under his breath. A woman gasped. Maya didn't flinch. Her heart was pounding like it wanted to burst out of her chest, but her voice didn't betray it. She had seen worse than this man, been through deeper darkness than public mockery, and most of all, she was done being small to make arrogant men comfortable. Doug raised an eyebrow, intrigued. He looked at the investors. "Gentlemen, you're about to witness the birth of delusion," he sneered. "This waitress thinks she can impress you with a few kung fu panda lines." One of the investors, Akira Tanaka, cleared his throat. "Doug," he said softly, "maybe we should." Doug waved him off. No, you need to understand how things work here. This is America. We don't hand out respect for free." He turned back to Maya. "You ready, Professor?" At that word, something in Maya's eyes flickered just for a second. Then it was gone. Doug continued, oblivious. "We'll make it fun. My assistant will bring you the special menu. The one we give Shanghai delegates. Full technical terminology. No Google Translate nonsense." A ripple of laughter rose around him, hollow and forced. One of the waiters hesitated, glancing at Maya with a look halfway between apology and admiration. Maya didn't move. She remembered the sleepless nights studying in a cramped Beijing apartment, the sharp tones of her professor correcting her Mandarin over and over until her mouth ached, the conference hall where she'd once translated 6 dialects in one afternoon. She wasn't just fluent, she was forged. As Doug waited, basking in the attention, Maya's calm was unshakable. This wasn't just a language test. This was the moment she had unknowingly trained for her entire life, and Doug Harrington had no idea what storm he had just summoned. 3 years before that humiliating night at the Avalon Grill, Dr. Maya Thompson was standing on a stage at Stanford University, presenting her research on neural language networks and cultural cognition. Her voice carried the calm precision of someone who had found her purpose. The audience of academics and linguists leaned forward as she explained how human emotion could be translated through syntax. Her name was printed on journals. Her lectures were streamed by students across continents. She was 30, brilliant, respected, and unstoppable. Then, one phone call shattered everything. It was 2:13 a.m. when her phone buzzed. The voice on the other end was trembling. "Your mother collapsed. It's a stroke. She's in the ICU, in the sterile corridors of St. Luke's Hospital." Time lost all meaning. Machines beeped. Tubes snaked from her mother's frail body. The woman who had worked 2 jobs to send Maya to college now lay motionless beneath white sheets. And when the doctor mentioned long-term rehabilitation, experimental treatment, and insurance limitations, Maya realized what those words meant. Debt. Endless, merciless debt. At first, she tried to balance it all: lectures by day, hospital visits by night. But as weeks turned to months, the bills multiplied. Her savings dissolved. Her car was sold. She took a leave of absence, then extended it, then received a polite email from the university. "Your position has been reassigned." Maya's colleagues stopped answering her messages. Invitations dried up. One of her co-authors replaced her name on a publication draft without so much as a word. The world of academia that once celebrated her intelligence now turned cold and transactional. She was no longer a rising star, just another story of promise interrupted. When her mother, Evelyn, finally woke after 5 months, she was not the same. Her speech was slurred, her hands shook. She needed constant care. Maya moved them into a small 1-bedroom apartment in the South Side, the kind where you could hear the neighbors' arguments through the walls and smell fried chicken from 3 floors down. She tried everything: freelance translations, online tutoring, grant applications, but nothing was enough. Medical debt was a monster that ate faster than she could feed it. So one day, she put her PhD diploma into a drawer and walked into the Avalon Grill. She still remembered the look on the manager's face when she filled out the application. He stared at her resume for a full 10 seconds, then laughed awkwardly. "You have a doctorate?" "Yes," Maya said quietly. He blinked. "In what?" "Linguistics." "Well," he said, tossing her a uniform, "you'll need to memorize the dessert menu by tomorrow." That was her initiation into the new life, the one where intelligence didn't pay rent and dignity was optional. Nights at the Avalon were long. She learned to move through the marble hall like a shadow, quiet, efficient, unseen. She served men who never looked at her face, women who complained about the temperature of the champagne, tables that snapped their fingers instead of speaking names, and yet she endured. Because when her mother smiled faintly during physical therapy, or when she managed to walk a few steps without the wheelchair, it felt worth it. Every night, when she came home after her shift, Maya would make tea, sit by the window, and reopen her old laptop. It was cracked near the hinge, held together with tape, but it still worked. She logged into academic databases using expired credentials she had somehow kept access to. Papers in Mandarin, research in Korean, studies in Japanese. She devoured them all. Language was the one thing they couldn't take from her. Sometimes, as dawn crept through the blinds, she would catch herself whispering phrases in Mandarin, her tone still flawless, her grammar precise, a forgotten rhythm of a past life. That's how she survived, by refusing to forget who she really was. Still, the humiliation seeped in through the smallest cracks. One evening, a customer snapped his fingers at her, called her sweetheart, and handed her a business card with a smirk that made her skin crawl. Another time, a co-worker mocked her for talking like a professor when she used the word meticulous. But the worst were men like Douglas Harrington. Doug had been a regular for months. The kind of man who called bartenders kid and told women they were beautiful for their age. He always came in loud, always left a mess, and always tipped just enough to pretend it made him decent. To him, Maya wasn't a person. She was part of the decor like the chandelier or the silverware. So when he threw that pile of money on her tray that night, it wasn't the first time she'd felt small, but it would be the last. Because buried beneath years of exhaustion and quiet survival, something inside her had been waiting patiently, silently for a moment to rise. And when Doug decided to make her his entertainment, he had no idea he'd just handed her the perfect stage, a stage she knew how to own, better than anyone else in that room. Doug Harrington was enjoying the spotlight far too much to stop. Now. As whispers curled through the room, and forks remained suspended above half-finished steaks, he leaned back in his chair with a predator's grin. "Let's make this a real performance, shall we?" he said, raising one manicured hand to flag a passing waiter. "Bring the Chinese investor menu," Doug commanded. "The special one." The waiter froze. His eyes darted from Maya to Doug and back again. "Sir, that menu is very detailed. It's only for official delegations from..." Doug cut him off with a single wave. "Perfect. If our resident language expert is the real deal, a few technical terms shouldn't scare her." A ripple of uneasy laughter passed through the room like static. The three Asian investors sat stiffly. Akira Tanaka adjusted his cufflink, but said nothing. Sung Ho Park glanced at his wine glass, suddenly interested in its reflection. The youngest of the trio, Jun Seo, merely leaned forward, his expression unreadable. Maya stood still, her hands steady on the tray of untouched drinks. Doug turned to her again. "What do you say, Maya?" Still feeling confident, she met his eyes without blinking. More than ever, Doug laughed, but there was something brittle behind the sound now. Maya's voice rang out clearly through the room. "But I have a proposal." "Oh?" Doug raised a brow. "Do tell. If I can not only describe 5 dishes from that menu in Mandarin," she said, "but also explain their regional origins, traditional preparation techniques, and cultural significance." She paused, letting the silence gather weight. "You double the bet. $200,000. It was as if the entire restaurant stopped breathing. The clink of silverware disappeared. The only sound was the distant hum of a wine fridge compressor. Doug tilted his head. "Double." "Yes." Maya's voice was calm, precise. "And if I fail, I'll do more than apologize. I'll kneel right here in front of this room, admit I lied, and work for this restaurant for free for an entire month." Gasps flickered across the room. Even the host at the front desk took a few steps closer. Doug hesitated. For the first time, his confidence faltered. His mouth opened slightly, and he glanced at the investors, expecting laughter, maybe support. But none came. Akira Tanaka finally spoke, softly but firmly. "Douglas, perhaps this has gone far enough." Doug waved dismissively. "Come now, Akira. You don't want to miss the show, do you?" His voice strained to maintain its earlier bravado. "You're about to see why I'm the best judge of character in this city." He turned back to Maya. $200,000 if you succeed. 1 month of unpaid labor if you fail. Deal?" Maya nodded. "Deal." They shook hands. Her grip was firm. His fingers were damp. Doug couldn't possibly know that this wasn't a gamble for Maya, it was a homecoming. The waiter returned, hesitant, holding a leather-bound folder like it was cursed. "Special menu from Shanghai delegation," he murmured, placing it on the table. Doug opened it with exaggerated flair, then paused. His eyes scanned the dense Chinese characters. For a second, the self-satisfaction on his face slipped. "Well," he muttered, "there are a lot of squiggles." Akira leaned forward. "May I see?" "No," Doug interrupted quickly. "She has to do it alone. No help." He handed the menu to Maya. "Let's see what you've got, Professor." Maya took it with a calm nod. Her eyes scanned the first page, and a small, knowing smile almost tugged at the corner of her lips. She recognized the dishes immediately, not just from reading but from memory, from taste, from lectures. From sweaty hours spent in Beijing apartment kitchens learning the precise tone for shujuyu, and the subtle regional difference between Hunan-style stir-fry and Sichuan dry pot. "May I choose which dishes?" she asked, flipping through the pages. "Choose whatever you want," Doug said with a sneer. "You're going to crash and burn either way." Maya's gaze swept toward the investors. "Before I begin, I'd like to confirm, are any of you fluent in Mandarin?" There was a long pause. Akira answered first, hesitantly. "I speak a little." Sung Ho shook his head. "Just basics," Maya nodded, then turned to Jun Seo. "And you, Mr. Seo?" He sat up straighter. "I'm fluent," he said, his voice steady. "I was raised in Seoul, but I spent 10 years in Taiwan. My Mandarin is strong." Doug let out a dramatic groan. "Oh great, now we're turning this into a spelling bee." "What's the point?" "The point," Maya replied, looking at him with steel in her voice, "is that I want a fair evaluation. You claim this is about integrity. Let's make it so." Doug chuckled, though there was a tremor in his voice now. "Fine, let's get on with it. One more thing," Maya added. "When I succeed, not if, but when I want the money handed to me immediately, in front of this room." Doug slapped the table. "You've got some nerve, and you've got a deal," she said, holding his gaze. No one spoke as Maya turned toward the center of the room. Menu in hand, Doug leaned back, arms crossed, confident that he'd just bought himself the best humiliation money could afford. But what he didn't see, what only the observant might have caught, was how Maya's fingers glided over the menu, not like someone deciphering, but like someone returning home. Her mouth already shaping words before a single syllable escaped her lips. The battle wasn't about to begin. It had already been won. The room had fallen into a hush so deep, it felt like breath itself had paused. Maya stepped into the center of the restaurant. The spotlight no longer metaphorical. The chandeliers above gleamed against her polished black uniform. The special menu rested lightly in her hands, but the weight of every gaze in that room pressed down like a mountain. Doug Harrington leaned back with his arms folded across his chest, smirking like a schoolyard bully waiting for the punchline to land. The three investors sat forward now, no longer passive spectators. Even the staff had paused, glasses unfilled, dishes untouched, as if the air had frozen in expectation. Maya took one final breath, soft and measured, like she had so many times before stepping onto academic stages around the world. Then she began. "Dear gentlemen, welcome to Avalon Restaurant. Tonight I would like to recommend you several traditional dishes from different regions of China." Her Mandarin was flawless, so smooth and confident it rolled off her tongue like poetry. The tonal precision was unmistakable, her phrasing elegant, formal, and academic. Jun Seo blinked. He turned sharply to Akira and Sung Ho, as if to confirm he wasn't imagining it. Maya wasn't just speaking Mandarin. She was presenting it like a trained cultural ambassador. "For our first course," she continued, switching seamlessly into English for the rest of the audience, "I present mapo tofu from the Sichuan region, prepared using aged Pixian chili bean paste. The balance of malinumness from Sichuan peppercorns and heat from red chilies represents a philosophy of harmony between intensity and subtlety." Doug's smirk faltered. "Just a bit." Maya shifted back to Mandarin, her cadence rising with the confidence of lived experience. She moved on to the second dish, Peking duck, as prepared using techniques developed by the historic Quanjude restaurant in 1864. "This dish," she translated, "undergoes a 24-hour marination, then is roasted in a traditional fruitwood oven to create the signature crisp skin that reflects centuries of imperial culinary refinement." A whisper rippled through the room. Doug was no longer leaning back. His arms had uncrossed. He looked, unsure. Yuki Sato, seated at the edge of another table nearby, raised a hand politely. "Excuse me," he said to no one in particular, "but is she also explaining the cultural history of these dishes?" "She is," Jun Seo answered, his voice tinged with awe. "And not just accurately, she's doing it with terminology most native Mandarin speakers wouldn't even use." Maya went on. "The third dish is the Shanghai xiaolongbao, a delicate soup dumpling with 18 pleats inside. Xiaolongbao from Shanghai," she explained in English. "Each dumpling traditionally contains 18 folds, a number symbolizing prosperity. The broth inside is gelatinized pork marrow, which liquefies during steaming. This technique, developed during the Ming Dynasty, represents the mastery of textural transformation. Doug coughed into his hand. His face was noticeably flushed. "This isn't real," he muttered. "It's rehearsed." A setup. Maya turned toward him slowly. Her voice remained calm, almost gentle. "Would you like me to continue in another dialect, Mr. Harrington?" she asked. "Beijing Mandarin, Taiwanese inflection, or perhaps Cantonese?" Doug squinted. "There's more than one kind?" Without waiting for permission, Maya switched. "If it were in Hong Kong, we would present the dish differently, emphasizing the tradition of Qing Dynasty tea houses. Perfect Cantonese, authentic cadence. The musicality of it was unmistakable." Jun Sio's eyes widened. "That's not just Cantonese. That's Hong Kong Cantonese. Perfect tones. No errors." Doug sputtered, blinking rapidly. "Who the hell are you?" Maya looked at him for a long, measured moment. Then came the blow. "I am Dr. Maya Thompson," she said quietly. "PhD in computational linguistics from Stanford University. Postdoctoral specialization in Chinese dialectology from MIT. Former full professor. Visiting scholar at Beijing Foreign Studies University. Author of Bridges of Taste. How Culinary Language Shapes Cultural Identity in Modern Mandarin. Published by Cambridge University Press. Silence, deafening. I've translated diplomatic speeches at the UN. I've served as a cultural liaison for 3 embassies. I was once invited to speak at the Chinese ambassador's table about regional food linguistics." Doug had gone pale. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. "In case you're wondering," Maya added, "technical description of Chinese cuisine wasn't a parlor trick. It was my research." Jun Seo let out a low whistle, half disbelieving. "This is extraordinary." Even Akira Tanaka, who had remained silent for most of the evening, leaned back and exhaled. "Doug," he said softly, "you tried to humiliate a woman who could run linguistic circles around half our diplomatic staff." Doug slammed a fist onto the table. "Stop, this is a setup. This is all staged." Maya didn't move. Her tone didn't rise. Her expression didn't change. "Why is it so hard for you to believe, Mr. Harrington?" she asked. "Because I'm black? Because I serve drinks for a living? Or because someone like me, someone you assumed was beneath you, just exposed how little you know?" His eyes darted around the room. People were no longer pretending not to watch. Phones were discreetly raised. Videos were being recorded. Witnesses weren't just the elite clientele anymore, they were the entire internet waiting to explode. Doug stood up, but his chair wobbled behind him. "This isn't fair," he spat. "Fair?" Maya echoed. "What would have been fair, Doug? If I had bowed my head and walked away? If I'd let your ego turn me into your next cocktail party anecdote?" Then she placed the menu back on the table. "Mr. Harrington," she said, her voice like a blade wrapped in silk, "you owe me $100,000. In cash, right now. In front of everyone." Doug stared at her like a man watching a storm he could no longer outrun. "And Maya?" She stood calmly in the eye of it, not as a waitress anymore, but as the storm itself. Doug Harrington's hands trembled slightly as he reached into the inner pocket of his blazer. For a man whose entire life revolved around wealth, wielding it, flashing it, weaponizing it, he had never known what it felt like to bleed power from the fingertips. But now, standing in the middle of Avalon Grill, with every eye locked on him and a camera lens at every angle, Doug Harrington was watching the walls of his empire begin to buckle. Maya stood opposite him, still unmoving, as if made of stone and poise. She hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't insulted him. She didn't need to. She had simply been more intelligent, more cultured, more articulate, more powerful than any man like him had ever imagined a black waitress could be. And that was what terrified him most. He pulled out his wallet, thick and black, the kind you could feel the ego stitched into, and peeled out crisp hundreds, one after another. A slow, humiliating count. $100,000, then another 100. His hand stalled at $160,000. "Keep going," Maya said softly, but the steel in her voice was unmistakable. He finished the stack. $100,000 sat between them on the table. like a monument to everything Doug had misunderstood about the world. I trust the count is accurate, Maya said, not even looking at the bills. Doug's mouth twitched. This wasn't what I meant, but it's exactly what you said, she replied. Across the room, Jun Seo stood and clapped once, slow and deliberate. Then Akira followed. Then Sung Ho. And then, as if a dam had broken, the room erupted. Applause, nods, even cheers from the staff near the kitchen. Doug stood alone in a swirl of shame. Akira stepped forward, voice low but sharp as glass. Our firm was considering a $180 million partnership with you, Doug. It's off the table. Doug whipped toward him. What? You can't be serious. Jun Seo pulled out his phone. It's already in the minutes. This was a test of judgment. You failed spectacularly. I didn't know. Doug barked. No one told me who she was. That's the point, Maya said, finally taking a step forward. You didn't know, but you assumed. Doug's voice cracked. I didn't mean to humiliate you. Yes, you did, Maya answered. But that's not the worst part. The worst part is you thought I wouldn't fight back. You thought I'd smile, nod, and thank you for your scraps. You saw a uniform and thought it was a definition. Akira turned to Doug, his expression unreadable. You tried to publicly destroy someone's dignity to impress us. That tells us everything about how you lead. Doug turned red, then pale, then a shade somewhere in between. The restaurant manager approached slowly, whispering something into Doug's ear. Doug's eyes widened in disbelief. No, he said. You're not serious. The manager nodded solemnly. I'm afraid so. Mr. Harrington, we reserve the right to deny service to anyone. We'll be escorting you out. Laughter small and sharp broke out near the bar. Doug's ego was bleeding out now, and he knew it. You're ruining my name over some waitress. No, Akira corrected him. You ruined your name over your own arrogance. As Doug was guided toward the exit, he glanced back at Maya one last time. She didn't say a word, didn't smile, didn't gloat. She simply stood taller than she had all night, and the entire room noticed. The video went viral in less than 24 hours. Titled Racist Tycoon Gets Schooled by Multilingual Waitress. It racked up over 15 million views by the end of the week. Clips of Maya's speech circulated with subtitles in Mandarin, Cantonese, Korean, and Spanish. Bloggers called it the most satisfying public takedown in years. Academics shared it as proof that soft power still mattered in a world obsessed with dominance. Celebrities tweeted their support. A grassroots campaign raised another $50,000 for Maya and her mother within days. But Maya didn't touch the donations. She had already won something far more valuable. 2 weeks later, she received a call from Jun Seo's assistant. Mr. Seo and Mr. Tanaka would like to offer you a position, the voice said. Director of Intercultural Strategy at Tanaka Park International. They believe someone with your skill set could lead global communications across 6 markets. Maya hesitated. What's the salary? $180,000 a year, the voice replied. Full medical coverage, relocation package, and a corner office with your name on the glass. Maya looked at her mother, now laughing at a sitcom, curled up on a borrowed sofa, and finally let herself cry. Doug Harrington's empire, on the other hand, unraveled faster than a loose thread on a cheap suit. Investors pulled out. Bankers started asking questions. His name, once associated with luxury, was now a liability. His wife filed for divorce. His 2 adult sons, embarrassed, distanced themselves. The construction deals dried up. Lawsuits followed. And within 3 months, the man who once threw money on people like breadcrumbs was living in a 1-bedroom rental in Naperville. He got a job at a luxury car dealership, selling, not buying. And sometimes, just sometimes, a customer would glance at him and say, "Hey, weren't you that guy in the video?" Doug would force a smile and change the subject. Maya, meanwhile, moved into a 2-bedroom apartment with a balcony overlooking the lake. Her mother now had in-home care, top-shelf medications, and weekly physical therapy. She walked into her new office with a quiet, deep pride, not for proving Doug wrong, but for proving herself right. 6 months later, a golden afternoon spilled across the skyline of downtown Chicago. The glass facade of Tanaka Park International shimmered in the sunlight. its 47th floor reflecting the kind of promise only earned, never given, inside a sleek corner office with quiet decor and a view of Lake Michigan. Maya Thompson sat at her desk, now adorned not with trays or silverware, but with research briefs, international contracts, and a placard that read, Dr. Maya Thompson, Director of Intercultural Strategy, was dressed in navy slacks, a silk blouse, and the kind of confidence that didn't need to announce itself. There was no applause, no spotlight, just the quiet dignity of a woman who had come home to her own excellence. A knock came at her door. Dr. Thompson, said her assistant, you've got that panel at Columbia this weekend. Do you want to finalize your talking points today? Maya smiled. Yes, but first, can you confirm my mother's physical therapy schedule for the next 2 weeks? Already on your calendar, the assistant said with a wink, when the door closed. Maya turned her chair toward the window. Below, the city bustled with a rhythm she once feared. She'd never return to, at least not on her own terms. But here she was, not because someone handed her a second chance, but because she built it piece by shattered piece, back in the apartment on the Upper West Side where she now lived with her mother. The walls were decorated with small, deliberate joys, a framed page from her doctoral thesis, a faded photo of her mother in a nurse's uniform, and a calligraphy piece gifted by a Chinese professor that read, True strength flows quietly. Evelyn Thompson was in the kitchen, humming as she brewed tea. Her steps were slower now, her hands not as steady, but the smile that lit her face whenever she saw Maya that hadn't faded one bit. They had made it through. Not just survival. Stability. Dignity. Peace. Meanwhile, Doug Harrington was learning the quiet math of humiliation. His fall had not been explosive, it had been steady. Merciless erosion. After the viral video, his name became poison in every deal. The Japanese investors had pulled out instantly, but more followed. Dubai, London, Toronto. Whispers circulated through financial circles faster than any PR firm could repair. Lawsuits from previous partners resurfaced. A tax audit unearthed discrepancies. Real estate holdings were frozen. His fortune crumbled not with drama, but with indifference. He moved into a rental in Naperville. No doorman, no wine cellar, no private driver. Just the sound of neighbors mowing lawns and the distant jingle of kids riding bikes. His job at the car dealership paid hourly. He sold mid-range sedans and tried not to be recognized. Sometimes he wasn't so lucky. Hey, one customer said, squinting, you look like that guy from that video. Doug smiled, tight and practiced. People say that a lot. The customer didn't press. But later, he left a 1-star Yelp review. At Columbia University. The auditorium buzzed. The event was titled, Voices That Rise, From Margins to Power. Maya stepped onto the stage in front of 400 students, professors, and reporters. Her name had drawn crowds, but her story had kept them listening. She wasn't just a linguist now. She was a symbol. The student moderator introduced her as a scholar, a survivor, and an architect of her own return. Maya took the podium, adjusted the microphone, and smiled gently. 3 years ago, she began. I was a professor giving lectures on syntax theory and computational linguistics. A pause. 2 years ago, I was wiping tables and being mistaken for someone without a name. The room leaned in. And today, I stand here not as someone who overcame but as someone who endured, quietly and completely, until it was time to rise. She didn't talk about Doug Harrington by name. She didn't need to. She talked about assumptions, about the power of language, about how racism often wears the suit of politeness, but speaks in the tone of dismissal. She talked about being underestimated and how that, more than cruelty, is what often does the most damage. But, she said, there's something beautiful about being underestimated, because when the moment comes to reveal your truth, no one sees it coming. The room exploded in applause. Some students wiped tears from their cheeks. One raised a hand and asked, Dr. Thompson, what's the best revenge? Maya thought for a moment, then said softly, the best revenge is becoming so radiant, so undeniable, that their cruelty shrinks in comparison, that you're no longer defined by what they did but by what you built despite it. Standing ovation. Every single person on their feet. That night, as Maya walked out of the auditorium, she passed by a student scribbling her name into a notebook. Another one whispered, "She's the woman from the video, right?" But with reverence, not pity. She didn't stop to correct them. She didn't remind them she was more than that moment, because she was and she wasn't. The waitress, the professor, the daughter, the storm. All of it. Whole. In the cab ride home, she looked out the window at the city lights streaking past. A message buzzed on her phone. From her old advisor at Stanford. "Watched your speech. You made us proud. The department wants you back anytime." Maya smiled, not because she needed their validation, but because she had already found something deeper than titles, a sense of self. No one could evict her from. The rain came softly that morning. Not the dramatic, thundering kind that demands attention, but the quiet kind that settles into the cracks of the pavement and clings to window panes, like secrets too long kept. Maya Thompson sat on the balcony of her apartment on the Upper West Side, a cup of ginger tea warm in her hands. Below her, the city moved as it always did, relentless, oblivious, alive. Inside, her mother was laughing at a cooking show, the sound of soft comfort echoing through the apartment. Life hadn't just returned, it had evolved. This wasn't a return to who Maya used to be. It was a becoming, a deeper version of herself, forged in fire and polished in silence. She wasn't trying to prove anything anymore. She was. In the weeks after the Columbia speech, invitations flooded in, UN panels, cultural symposiums, executive consulting offers. Companies that once ignored her resume now chased her for insight. But Maya chose carefully. She wasn't interested in building a brand. She was interested in building bridges. She accepted an offer to lead an initiative on global equity in language education. She partnered with a nonprofit to mentor young Black women in academia. And every Thursday evening, without fail, she taught a small language class at the local library free of charge, because somewhere out there, another young girl might be hiding her brilliance behind someone else's expectations. She remembered being that girl, and she never forgot how easy it was for the world to overlook you when you wore the wrong uniform. Meanwhile, the ripples from that night at Avalon Grill had turned into waves. The video continued to circulate. It was now being shown in diversity training sessions across multiple Fortune 500 companies. Professors assigned it in sociolinguistics courses. Activists referenced it in speeches about systemic bias. One caption, reposted over and over, read, "She didn't raise her voice. She raised the bar." Doug Harrington, once the face of aggressive ambition, was now a cautionary tale, not just of arrogance but of blindness. He had mistaken confidence for delusion, education for pretense, a Black woman's silence for weakness, and in doing so, he had become the architect of his own unraveling. One rainy Sunday, Maya returned to Avalon Grill, not to eat, not to gloat, just to see. The same host stood at the front desk. He looked up, blinked, and froze for a moment before recognizing her. "Dr. Thompson," he said softly. She smiled. "Just Maya today." He swallowed. "It's good to see you. I wanted to thank you," she said, surprising him. For what? For hesitating. That night, when he asked for the menu, he stared at her, startled. "You may not have said anything," she continued, "but silence isn't always cowardice. Sometimes it's resistance in disguise." He nodded slowly. "We all talk about it now, you know. The staff, what you did. It changed things here." Maya nodded once, then turned to go. She didn't need a table. She had already taken her seat at something far more powerful. Months later, Maya sat across from a group of high school students at a community center on the South Side. The room was small, the floor scuffed, but the energy in it was electric. The girls stared at her with the kind of awe Maya used to reserve for guest speakers. When she was their age, "You really spoke 9 languages?" One of them asked. "Still do," Maya said with a wink. "Working on my 10th. Did you ever think," another girl asked, "that you'd go from waiting tables to doing all this?" Maya tilted her head thoughtfully. "I didn't plan it," she admitted, "but I prepared for it. Every night I stayed up studying when I was exhausted. Every time I bit my tongue instead of shouting back. Every time I chose to keep going, even when no one saw me." She leaned in. "That's the trick. Greatness isn't something you show off. It's something you carry quietly until the world is forced to recognize it. The room went quiet, and one by one, the girls began to write down their dreams not with fear, but with fire. Later that evening, Maya stood in front of her bathroom mirror, washing her face before bed. She caught her reflection, not just the skin and the eyes and the curve of a tired smile, but all of it. The waitress, the professor, the daughter, the woman who once whispered Mandarin in the dark just to remember the sound of who she was. She touched the mirror lightly with her fingertips and whispered, "Not for anyone else to hear. You never disappeared. You were just waiting." The story of Maya Thompson wasn't about revenge, it was about reclamation. It was about the quiet strength of those who rise not through vengeance, but through vision, who turn insult into oxygen and rebuild their names, brick by brilliant brick. It was about the thousands of people who are dismissed every day because of the color of their skin, the badge on their shirt, the accent in their voice, and how one woman, standing in a room meant to shame her, decided to remind the world that dignity doesn't come from wealth or titles or applause. It comes from knowing who you are and refusing to let anyone make you smaller than that truth. So the next time someone underestimates you, smile. Let them. Because when the time comes to rise, they'll never see you coming.